Hi, this is Zach with Worn&Wound. Today I'll be taking a look at the Melbourne Portsea. This is a watch that I have to say I'm very excited to review. I'm a fan of watches in this style, which would be the marine chronometer style. And what I really like that Melbourne did here, and I recall actually talking about when we wrote an article when he originally did his Kickstarter for this, was that he took the idea of the marine chronometer and just kind of went with it. So it has a similar feeling to those watches, it has a kind of a nautical feeling to it. It just speaks to that language, but it's really its own design. And it's interesting, it has nice layering to it, and I just think there's a lot of really cool details in here that just make it a very standout piece. One such detail is actually that it uses an interesting movement, which is the Miyota 9120, which is a version of the 9015, which is a movement we see a lot. But in this case, it actually has a triple calendar on it. So as you see, it has the day here, the month here, and the date there. So that's a nice feature that we don't come across very often, especially not at this price point. These watches come in at a fairly modest $613. Of course, with sapphire crystal, a nice leather strap, all the trappings you would expect. So yeah, they're just very interesting watches, and there's two styles that we have here today. This one is all blue, the stainless steel case, and obviously a blue strap, and then you have the kind of more classic marine style, which is white with black markers and a brown strap here. And yeah, let's take a closer look now. The Portsea has a 40 millimeter case that is about 48 millimeters lug to lug and 13 millimeters tall. Oddly, it actually features 21 millimeter lugs. I'm not 100% sure what the decision making was there. Perhaps it was a proportional decision, though I think 20 millimeter would have been not noticeably different. But the case design, though, from the top looks very simple. It has some really nice details on it, which is something I feel like Melbourne does that is worth noting. I remember this on the first watch of this review, that the case was just more interesting than you expect it to be. So here when you look at the top, you can actually see how the lugs kind of come up and over the middle case. When you look at it from the side, it's just all a little bit more clear. So you have a tall bezel, you have this wide, tall lug, and it kind of comes up like a lip into this middle case area. So you have this sense of like a multi-part case that might actually look like it has more parts than it has, but it adds to the intricacy of it. And I think also, obviously works with the concept and the aesthetic potentially of like a nautical watch. So just a very nice case, and subtle but uniquely their own. On the right side here, you have a push and pull crown. It is about 6 millimeters wide by about 3 millimeters tall. Easy to grip. You don't need to manually wind this, obviously, so you might not be using that much. On the end is a little Melbourne logo, which is kind of intricate M with some lines around it. I think it's a nice little detail there. You probably can see already that there is a pusher here at 2. You can actually use that to change the date, which I'll show you when we take a look at the movement and how it works. Flipping the watch over now, and you might be surprised, I know I was very pleasantly surprised to see this really intricate Caseback. I love details like this. Not many brands kind of go the extra mile to do something like this, and I think it's always great, especially when it's at a fairly reasonable price point here. It's $613, so this does feel like an added detail that if it hadn't been there, nobody would have kind of scoffed at the lack of detail, that's to say. But here, see this very intricate deep etching. It's really beautifully done. So it's not just like a flat graphic. There's a lot of dimensionality to it. Not honestly 100% sure how those little things are made, if they're sculpted or if they're pressed and then implied here. But it's beautiful, just great to look at, and obviously a detail that is for the owner of the watch. Not it's not on display ever. So it's just part of the whole package, and just makes it kind of a altogether nicer, more well thought out piece. Obviously in this little circle here you have some details, caliber 90-20, 26 jewels. It does have 100-meter water resistance there, which obviously this isn't a dive watch or a sport watch, but it is nice that it has more than enough water resistance should you splash it with water or forget you have it on, you jump in the shower. Though I would probably, generally speaking, just avoid water with it. But the dial of the Melbourne Portsea clearly speaks to the marine chronometer look, though like I said, it's kind of their own twist on it, but it's still very classical in its own right. So what's interesting about this is there are two layers here that you probably already see. There's like a back layer that is a matte surface. Here we're looking at the blue one first. I'll show you the white one in a second. So you have this matte, inky, dark blue back there that has these really nice, simple texture, and there's just parallel lines running up it. It's not like a gouache. It's not trying to be fancy. It's just a little bit of a texture to kind of activate that space. There's some text on there. Obviously the date window above 6. But then all the indices, as well as these subdials, are actually on a raised level, which is ceramic, interestingly. And you can see probably a bit here, but it does have a gloss to it. So that's just actually a very interesting, I think from a manufacturing standpoint, why use ceramic versus other materials? It has an interesting sheen. I think it holds the printing very nicely. It looks extremely crisp on there. It's almost like, a substitute for enamel. And an enamel dial marine chronometer is definitely like a thing, you can find from high-end brands. So I think it's kind of a play on that. But it's just very interesting and immediately separates this from the herd of marine chronometers, which generally all look more or less identical. So on this ceramic disc, you have this super clear Arabic numeral hour indices here, surrounded by a train track indice, just super clear, easy to read. And then you have the two subdials. On the left here, you have the day, and on the right, you have the month. They're indicated in the same way. There's a nice symmetry between them. So you just have 3-letter, abbreviations for either the day or the month, surrounded by a double-line sort of train track index there. Nice balance there. I think sometimes you see watches with these triple calendars and it's like they want to pull off almost looking like a chronograph. And here they're not going for that at all. It's going for a very classic look. It's handsome. It's almost like stately, like there's something very proper about it, and it works perfectly for this kind of watch. And the functionality of having the full triple date there, I think is great. It's not something you really see very often. Not that many people are using this movement, and if they are so, they're not using it as tastefully as done here. So just a great, to have that available. Right now it's not set correctly, but, it just at a glance to have all that information there. The date on the blue one is black on white, so it does stand out a bit more. Sometimes that bothers me, but I do like the 6 o'clock spot there. And I don't know, personally, I think if they had made it matched, it might have almost disappeared too much. The date is obviously an important part of the concept of this watch, given that it has this movement in it. Looking at the hands now, this one you have a polished steel set of hands. You have these very sharp alpha hands for the minute and hour. They're very clear. They point, this one points right to the minute track. This one points to the inside of that ring. The hour points to the inside of the ring. So, they're very clearly separated. And then you have the stick second here, which is sweeping with the, nice 28,800 beats per hour sweep of the Miyota movement. It has the Melbourne M on the end, which is sort of a signature of theirs. And then on the two subdials, you just have simple pointer hands with kind of like these large dot counterweights on the back sides of them. I like the way those look, also very clear and easy to read. Now let's take a look at the white dial. Now taking a look at the white dial, obviously everything is the same as the blue dial. You have a matte white background. You can actually probably see the textured lines here a little bit more because the background is light. The little shadows that cast stand out more, as does really the top layer. But it's a beautiful look. This is a little bit more classical looking than the blue dial. In that marine chronometers are typically, classically at least, a white enameled surface. So this has that very classic look to it. Black text and indices on top of the white, and then you actually have blue steel hands. These are probably not heat sealed so much as galvanized, but they definitely get the look across. They're not too bright. They have that kind of, sometimes they're blue, sometimes they're black look. It is a very nice look on the white dial here. Quickly talking about them, I think the blue really kind of caught me by surprise because I'm not typically drawn to blue, but I found this dark midnight blue to be really attractive and just, once again, kind of taking that marine chronometer look into a different place that I found to be very attractive. But yeah, you couldn't go wrong with either of these. So the movement in the Portsea is the Miyota 9120, which, as I mentioned, is a variation on the 9015 automatics, which we've seen a lot and are seeing a lot more of as a more affordable automatic alternative to, Swiss movements or other Japanese movements. And one of the benefits of it is that it is a hacking, hand-winding movement with a frequency of 2800 800 beats per hour. So you have a nice, smooth, sweeping second hand. It's also very thin, and from everything I've heard, just an all-around good movement that is proving to be robust. So anyway, the 9120 version is the triple date version. As I said, you have the day, month, and date here. Otherwise, the functions are all the same. So to operate these functions, you can turn the crown counterclockwise to change the day here, clockwise to change the date, and then there's two ways to change the month. Either you can cycle all the way through, so when you go to 31, from 31 back to 1, it will progress the month there, or you can use a blunt object here and push the little pusher there, sorry, tongue twister, and that will progress the month as well. That's easy to do. Both are easy to do. If you're keeping this watch on your wrist and wound up, you're not going to really need to do that very often anyway. On the wrist, the Portsea wears very nicely. 40 millimeter case is, I think, a good size for a marine chronometer style watch. They're typically larger watches, even going up to almost like 44, 45. So 40 millimeters is like a very small version of it, but it keeps the feeling of it. And since they're usually kind of larger, more robust watches, I think a little bit of the thickness here kind of adds to kind of giving it more of that massive feeling. But it's still elegant, it's handsome, and it's just, it's a very sharp looking watch. This is, I'd call it a formal watch, not necessarily a dress watch, because, whatever, if a dress watch being like 38 and tiny or anything like that, but there is a classical quality to this, a formal quality to this. It's definitely a smart looking watch, definitely a watch you can wear to formal events. It's very clean looking, it's very, I wouldn't call this, it has a nice presence on the wrist in that it's noticeable, but it isn't a watch that calls out. It's reserved, just kind of a subtle sophistication to it that when you look at more closely, especially you, rather than people are viewing your wrist, you're going to see the subtleties, you're going to see the texture, the layering, the intricacies of the typefaces, just all those little things. So, it's just a really enjoyable watch to wear. Obviously, the all blue version here is very interesting. Like I said, I liked this blue color a lot. It's not too blue, so it doesn't interfere with things. I think, I have a gray shirt on here. It looks really nice. It looks nice against the herringbone background here. I think this would actually look great on a brown strap as well. One note about the straps. So the straps are very nice, very plush, faux croc strap, which I think is a nice style for this. They're padded and rigid. They said they're 21 millimeters, which is a little bit funny why they went for that odd number. So if you change the strap, you'd have to go to 22 to squeeze in there, and that can just be a little bit annoying, though it is doable. The one thing I don't love, though, honestly, is actually how close the strap is into the case. I feel like it could have been a little bit lower on the lugs. There's a little bit of rubbing going on here, and I happen to think, a tiny bit of space around the case kind of makes the case more defined. The opposite being then when you have a bracelet in here that becomes continuous. I feel like with a strap, you want to see the roundness of that central case. So I just wish it was a little bit farther out on that lug, but that's getting very specific. But yeah, it's a well-made strap. Feels like it's going to last a long time. Melbourne, we've seen this buckle before in the other Melbournes. Really nice buckle. I love that they do a custom buckle because so many people overlook that detail. So yeah, now we'll just take a quick look at the white version on the wrist. The white dial is equally gorgeous. You have a lot more contrast here. A little bit more. There's a little bit more pop to it because I think like I said before, the textures in the dial come out even more so because of the contrast against the white. So there's clearly like more intricacy going on when you see it from afar. It's just beautiful, to be honest. I mean, this is such a masculine, handsome, classic watch. It hits a lot of kind of design notes for me. There's really nice symmetry and just everything. So really, it's super attractive. Like I said before, I think you can't go wrong with either dial. It just depends on how you feel like wearing it. If you want the more classical, cleaner look, I think the white dial might be the choice for you. Once again, goes great with kind of any clothing pairing, grays, blues, browns, greens. The white and black is totally neutral. I love actually that this came on a brown strap rather than a black strap, which might have been almost a more conservative or typical choice. I think the brown actually is a little bit more casual, but it adds some warmth to it. It's a little bit more stylish. I think the play with the brown to the white to the subtle glints of blue you're getting from the hands is much more interesting. than a black would have been. Though black is a good option if you want to get it to be even more formal. But yeah, I think this is a great choice and strap. And like the blue strap too, it's just, it's very well made. Really nice rigidity to it, but soft and comfortable at the same time. To wrap up, I think with the Portsea, Melbourne has made a great stride with their brand. They've made a really simply gorgeous watch that manages to stand apart from what else is out there. I mean, I always love to see somebody take something, riff on it, but not, betray it at the same time. And I think that's exactly what they did with the Portsea. They took the idea of a marine chronometer. They used a movement that I don't think anyone else has used in a marine chronometer before, the Miyota 9120 movement, which is a very cool movement. Has this cool triple calendar function on there. And they played with it, so you have the flavor of a marine chronometer, but you also have something distinctly Melbourne. And then they just, use cool details to kind of emphasize it and give it some nice texture and richness, just, make it a really well-rounded watch, the kind of thing you can put on and enjoy, I think, for a very long time, ad infinitum, really. So, yeah, I mean, it's $613. I also think these are quite fairly priced. Once again, they have a really cool movement in it, sapphire crystal, they have dials with ceramic in them and nice texturing, an interesting case design that is very clearly not off the shelf as well. So everything you really want to find in something you're going to spend, a not unsubstantial amount of money on. So please read the full review on Worn&Wound. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you.